Behind the Shades.
Take us through how you came to the point where your first thought was, I think this is an option for me, and then to the point where you actually attempted it.
So back when I was 16, I was a teenager. I was awkward. I had a very difficult household experience, and I just didn't feel loved. And I found myself one day walking home, and in the town that I lived in, we have, these overpasses that go over a highway because the highway splits the town in half. And I was walking over that overpass, and it was dark and secluded that night. And I found a bottle on the ground, and I broke it, just smashed it and broke it and put it up to my wrist and said, I just can't take this anymore. And for some reason, I stopped and I thought about, it was just so impulsive, and that I actually literally had to stop and say, wait a second, what's going to happen to my family if I do this? What's going to happen to my friends if I do this? I already knew what was going to happen to me. I didn't care, but I cared enough about them that I couldn't go through with it. So that was at the age of 16. Then when I was 22, I had a 3-year-old, and my marriage was not the best. And here I am, a 22-year-old with a 3-year-old, not really knowing how to be a mom. And it felt like the world was just coming down on me. And I was just so down and so depressed and so feeling like the world was just pressing down on me that after dinner one night, I said, I'm going out. And I went to the store and I bought a bottle of liquor and a box of pills. And I went to a nearby park, took the whole box of pills, drank the whole bottle of liquor, and then realized, what the hell am I doing? And I was only a block and a half away from home. And I went home and I said, help me. And all that got me was my stomach pumped and in the hospital. Nobody ever talked to me about what my feelings were and what I was going through. And time went on. I learned to manage things, got out of that bad relationship, got into a very good relationship. And then I had a tragedy after a tragedy after a tragedy in my life. And I decided at that point that one of two things is going to happen. Either I'm going to get myself help or I won't be here. And I loved my son and my husband way too much to do that. So I checked myself into a hospital. And I was fortunate enough that I was seeing a therapist at the time who helped me get into the hospital and get some help so that I can start thinking a little bit more about what was going on with me. And at that point in time, it was the worst 5 days of my life. It was, being in that environment was horrible. And I got out as soon as I could. And then I worked on my mental health, and, I was good for a long time. I was good for 19 years. And then again in 2019, I had one thing after another weigh heavy on me. And I do have to preface this by saying I've thought about suicide almost every day of my life. So it's always been a struggle for me and always been a battle for me. And quite honestly, I probably should have been doing therapy for a lot longer than I did. And I stopped for a very long period of time. But one night, my husband came home and I was crying like a baby, sitting on the couch, crying like a baby. And I told him I was going to leave him. And he wouldn't take that as an acceptable answer. He knew that something was wrong. First of all, I was crying my eyes out, and I don't normally do that. And he asked me the 3 most important questions in my life. And that was, are you okay? And all I could do was shake my head that I wasn't okay. Do you want to hurt yourself? And I shook my head yes, that I wanted to hurt myself. And the most important of all was, do you have a plan? And I had a most definite plan. And he did not leave my side for the rest of that night. I think he stayed awake all night, quite honestly. And the next day, he got me the help that I needed. And I was put into an intensive therapy. I wasn't put in inpatient, I was put in outpatient because the inpatient part scared the heck out of me. But for the first 3 days, I sat there with my head down, my bangs covering my eyes. I had no idea what anybody looked like. And nobody knew what I looked like or sounded like because I wouldn't talk. I mean, I couldn't even, it took 45 minutes for me to even tell a therapist that I needed help because she couldn't help me unless I told her I did. So after about 3 days, I realized, wait a second, all these people here are sitting here talking about their mental health and their struggles and their attempts at taking their own life. And I'm like, why shouldn't I be doing that? Why am I being so selfish that I'm not sharing this with other people? So I started talking and I realized that, hey, wait a second, this feels good. It's the first time I ever wasn't ashamed of my mental health. And so I started talking and I got myself help and I helped myself for the first time ever in my life and taught myself how to meditate, how to say affirmations, how to journal. It was a huge thing. And I read a book called Negative Self-Talk and How to Change It. Changed my life. I realized all of it. I used to say, if I talked to my friends the way I talk to myself, I would never have any friends because I was so negative to myself. And by learning all of that, I stopped being negative towards myself. Do I struggle with it? Absolutely. Do I still feel that, are those suicidal feelings? Absolutely. Some days are worse than others. Some days are better than others. But I've learned how to manage those feelings, which is not easy. Because if you've never felt that, people say, oh, I get depressed all the time. Okay, you get sad and it's situational usually. For me, I can't get out of bed. I can't move my body because I just feel like dead weight. I can't breathe because I feel like something's sitting on my chest. And I can't even talk to express my feelings because I just feel blank. And that's the hardest part of it, is that when you're in crisis, you are to a point where you can't help yourself. So many people say, well, why didn't you tell me you were struggling? You can't. First of all, you have that stigma. So when you are feeling decent or you're feeling that decline, you can't say anything because of the stigma. And then by the time you're there, you physically can't say anything. And so now I want to get out there and I want to let people know that it's okay to not be okay. We all have to deal with our mental health. Some of us have mental illness. I take medication. I deal with my mental illness. That's okay. But I also deal with my mental health, just like you do and everybody else deals with mental health. And we have to be able to say, hey, I'm not okay.